We'll go ahead and get started. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. On behalf of Universal Academy of Florida, thank you all alumni for being here, and thank you for our guest expert presenter, Sister Ivana Zajkovska, who is a super shiro who I've known now, I think, for 6 years. We met first when she was one of the directors at Minna for many years, inspiring youth. And in a conversation, I learned in that moment, I heard for the first time this word, positive youth development theory. And I was blown away by it. And I said, tell me more. And as she told me more, as you told me more, I just became so curious to learn about it and try my best to use it in my life since you taught me, and try my best also to invite others to learn about it and use it in their life. And so, Sister Yvonne, I want to thank you for coming out tonight and sharing this with the UAF alumni and parents. The folks that will be watching this video, are alumni of Universal Academy School, which now has over 900 students. It's been around for nearly 30 years. And some of the alumni are doctors and engineers, moms and dads, and business owners all around the US, if not the world. And we're at the start. The alumni and the school are at the start of thinking about a mentorship program. And that's when I thought about bringing you out because the students um, said they would love to have more mentorship. And so we're at the start of that conversation where we're asking the alumni to be mentors for the students. And so that's where, we thought that you could come and share with us about positive youth development theory so that we can be better parents, and perhaps this could potentially kick off a really good mentorship program for the kids at UAF. So I'll stop talking and hand it over to you. Thank you so much. And of course, Melanie, thank you for putting this on, and thank you for all the work that you do. These things don't happen without, the Wizards of Oz behind the curtains that make things happen. So Melanie, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. This is always a pleasure to talk about positive youth development. It doesn't feel like work. I mean, we've talked about this multiple times in many different settings, and it's always just talking about our young people. It just feels like where else would your attention be anyway, right? Like, so this is really cool that you have other people who are at least willing to step in, no matter how scary it may feel like in that moment, but they're like putting their name in the hat and saying, hey, count me in. Like I'm willing to step in, even though I don't really know exactly what I'll be doing. But that's really prophetic if you think about it, very in the Muslim sort of way. If you're thinking about like the salah, how you don't have to be invited. When you see a gap, you just fill it, right? You don't have to be invited to step in. And a lot of us, we wait to be invited. And what your people are doing here, the people on this call and people in the recording, is that they're just seeing the gap and they're saying, count me in. So that, inshallah, may Allah reward you for your intention and give you the support, the tools, the people around you to be able to live up to the, enormous task of guiding our next generation, our new generation. And before we go much further, I wanted to kind of begin our conversation with a borrowed greeting from the people, the Maasai people of Kenya and Tanzania. You know how in Islam we say Salaam alaikum, and that's kind of our greeting. So the Maasai people, actually, their greeting between themselves are, how are the children? So I don't want to say it in the original language because I do not want to butcher it, but it loosely translates to, how are the children? This is their greeting, with the hoped for response to be, all children are well, which is really, really cool way to meet one another, saying like, where are our priorities? I'm not asking you, how are you? I'm asking, how are the children? Because by that, I will determine what is the state of our society, what is the state of our community. And so for us, when we empower youth, we know that all full communities thrive. When you have people, young people who are doing well, they don't do so in a corner somewhere over there. They lift up their families, they lift up their communities, they lift up the societies, really. And so, if we were to ask that question today, realistically, how are the children? Um, in some countries, in some in some communities, in some neighborhoods, in some schools, they're thriving. But in so many other places, the answer may be heavy. And so some of us may be inspired to step into this role because of that. Some of us might have had already a person who inspired us. So you want to kind of pay it forward or pay it back, I guess, in this case. So I wanted us to also begin with a reflection for those of us who are here, and then also people who are going to be listening. Maybe you can do this on your own, but I want you to think about, because for us in the Dean, everything starts with the intention. So grounding our work in intention before we go into the theory, I think is important. So I want you to kind of think about a child in your life. It could be if you have children, like your own children, son, daughter, niece, nephew, a student, a neighbor, it doesn't really matter, a family friend. And I want you to think about what you wish for them. Maybe one, maybe two things. And you don't have to share, just I want you to envision it. And then what skills do we want them to have? So if you're thinking about this, it is very typical for people to want more for the children in their lives than for them not to have problems. We want our children to have full lives. We want them to have interests. We want them to have to be invested in activities, to build skills, right? For the longest time, we've defined a good kid by what they don't do, right? They don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't talk back, they don't challenge the system. And for too long, that's been our bar. And so, what positive youth development is positive youth development is kind of pushing us to think, it shifts the goal, right? I've never met a single parent who, when their newborn is kind of handed to them in their hospital and they're like cradling their newborn and they're saying, I hope you never get arrested, right? Nobody says things like that. You don't say, oh, I hope you um, make our economy so much better, right? Even the negative or the positive. This is not what we hope for our children or the children that we work with. You hope for them to be kind. You hope for them to find joy, to know their worth, to contribute to their community, to be a good person, right? So we don't want youth and the people that we're mentoring in your case to just be problem free. That's not the goal here. We want them to be whole. We want them to be engaged and empowered and equipped to lead lives with purpose, right? This is even Islamically very intuitive as in terms of a goal. So positive youth development it's giving us an approach. It is not a program. It is not a curriculum, but it is an intentional and pro-social approach to our work with and for youth. So what intentional means, obviously, that we have thought through where we want them to go. But then pro-social means that for too long we have been shining the light on what we want to avoid, right? But even if you were to avoid a hole in the road, right? You're saying, I'm walking down this road and I want to avoid that hole in the road. Doesn't mean you know where you're going, right? You're avoiding the hole in the road on your way to getting somewhere. And most of our conversations when it comes to youth have stopped at, I don't want them to fall into, and then fill in the blank risk behavior. So let's say we've accomplished that, right? They don't fall into that risk behavior. Does not mean that they're fully prepared for a productive life. So positive youth development is saying we're pro-social. It's engaging youth with their communities, with their schools, with their organizations, with their peer groups, their families, in a manner that's productive and constructive. It does so by recognizing their strengths. And this is key because I feel like, Tayeb, when we were talking 6 years ago, the words thriving, the word strengths were not really there. And now they're kind of thrown out there a lot, to a point where I feel like it's lost its original meaning. So when we're talking about recognizing strengths, for a lot of these kids, you may be the first one to be a mirror for them to even see their own strengths. 50% of the surveyed youth in the US a few years ago couldn't name one strength that they had. Doesn't mean that they didn't have any. It's just that they didn't have any adults in their life, any mentors, any teachers who have said, hey, you're really good at this. Or the way you took care of that kid who fell, that was really, really kind. That was very compassionate, right? So sometimes they may be doing things and they are not recognizing them as strengths. And so for us to be able to find that spark in them and to identify certain strengths and then build upon them is the job of positive youth development. And then as we're doing that, so we're engaging youth, we're utilizing their strengths and building their strengths, and we're working towards positive outcomes. That's the main kind of shift that we're talking about. And we're doing that by providing positive environments, by providing positive experiences, positive relationship, right? So everything around them, the environment, the experiences, the relationships is in a way that's pushing them towards positive outcomes. And without being too academic about it, there's 6 C's that are named as the positive outcomes that we want to see. Caring, we want to see caring people. We want to see people of character, contribution, so people who are contributing. I'm blanking right now. Caring, contribution, character. Oh my gosh. I'll come back to these ones because I'm blanking right now. So anyhow, these are the positive outcomes that we're working towards that we want to be able to infuse in the relationships we have with them. So when we've shifted, like now we know that positive youth development is our how, and that empowerment or productive outcomes are our why. Now we have to kind of ask ourselves what really builds that environment, what really builds those relationships. So that's where you come in. And what we want you to be able to do as mentors, as people who are working with young people, is we want you to be able to infuse as many developmental assets, meaning these are the building blocks of things that we want to see in our youth, right? These are the building blocks of thriving. They're the internal and external strengths that help youth move through the world with confidence, character, and care. So these are not extras, these are essentials in what we're trying to build. Competence, confidence, that was the one. Thank you. Character, connection, caring. And then if you have all those five, then contribution naturally flows out of those relationships. So how do we do this? You have to spend time getting to know the youth you want to build relationship and a connection with. So your job as mentors through the PYD, because this is called strength-based mentoring, and there's a thing called youth adult partnerships that is like a big term in youth development. But your job as a strength mentor, as a positive youth development champion for your youth, is not to change youth. It's to inspire good to come from them. So you have to remember that these youth are not just a shapeless clay. It's not just a vessel that you need to be filling, right? These are fires that need to be lit. And so most meaningful change, if you think about it, always kind of starts from within. So how do we inspire that? And I was kind of going through all the literature, and there's so many things on what constitutes a developmental relationship and, some of the skills that mentors have. And I've led entire workshop, like more practical workshops on building some of these mentorship skills. But I was thinking if we could focus on the big three, it's easier for us to begin and just to remember. So as a mentor, hopefully having PYD in the back of your mind, your first big role is really to provide a caring relationship, because you're not necessarily a teacher, although you teach. You're not a parent, although some parts of the relationships may feel like that, but they don't need you to be their parent. They don't need you to be their teacher, although you're going to be constantly switching hats. You just have to be someone that they know is there for them. Show real interest in who they are. Good tip is listen more than you speak. A lot of us, we come with a lot more life experience, more knowledge in certain places. So we may feel like, well, I can teach this or I can offer this expert advice. But often when you're mentoring, what is more needed, less is more, right? So you're speaking less, but you're listening more. Um, so really here, your presence and the way you show up matters more than your advice. So studies actually show that when even one caring adult who's a non-family member is present in a youth's life in a mentorship capacity, then it completely changes the trajectory of that person's life. Even when they are facing some very challenging situations or any adversity, they tend to avoid risk behaviors, that they tend to do better in school. They tend to make better choices, even with friends and peer pressure and things like that. So again, the first of the three big things is that you are providing a caring relationship. The second is, in my mind, really important because you're providing realistic, achievable, high expectations. So they're high because you're asking them to reach, like you're asking them to stretch beyond where they are. So it's not just the comfortable things, the things that they can do easily. So you are expecting high things, but at the same time, they're realistic and they can achieve them or like get almost there. And that's how we actually build one of the C's that we were talking about, which is competence. So when you're giving them situations and opportunities for them to stretch, but still learn and achieve these goals, then they become competent in whatever it is that you're working on. It's a lot of our schools and even the way that adults are talking to youth, it's become like fluff. I don't know if you guys have seen this where it's like, good job, everybody did amazing. And so there's depends. Like if you're working with 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds, that's fine, right? But if you're working with teenagers, these types of like platitudes are not really helpful, right? So if they're doing something, giving them constructive advice, something that they need to be working on, but obviously you're focusing on the effort, the work, not necessarily the results. So that's kind of in terms of advice giving and giving feedback, which is also its own art. Key point is you give advice and you give feedback on the work, on what's been happening, not the results. So if somebody's worked hard and they achieved a grade or something that they have no control over, your feedback should be over. Even if they achieved an A and that's what they were going for, your feedback shouldn't be, good job, you got an A. Your feedback should be, I'm really proud. You should be proud how hard you worked for that. I saw how much time you spent, right? So it's giving feedback on the effort. So let them know that you believe in them. You can say things like, you know, you got it. You got what it takes. I've seen you struggle through this. And we'll work with each other. It's okay. I see how much potential you have. I see how passionate you are about this. Tell me more about why you want to do this. Why do you want to take that test? Why do you want to take that class? Why do you want to go in that field? Um, and just kind of reminding them that they don't have to be perfect. They just have to keep growing. Um, so your belief in them becomes kind of the compass. It inspires belief in themselves because no matter how much they may push us away, adolescence is that time where they're kind of pushing us away and trying to figure out who they are. Most of teenagers, they push away to see, are you going to stick? Am I someone worth sticking around for? So don't feel like, oh, they're pushing me away because they don't care or they don't like me or whatever. Make sure that you're, again, providing that caring relationship, you're showing up, and then you're showing them that you believe in them. You believe in their potential because hopefully they will start believing in themselves as well. And the third one is to facilitate meaningful participation. So you want to, as much as possible, involve them in decision making. So what young people tend to do a lot of times is they will ask you, what should I do? What do you think I should do here? How should I handle this? What should my email say to this teacher who's giving me a hard time? And again, you may have to fight that urge to just tell them what to do, but that's not really teaching them the skill, right? So you actually have to involve them in the decision making, ask the questions, guide them to make their own decisions. Because right or wrong, they're going to have to deal with whatever the consequences of that decision is going to be. And hopefully they will learn from that experience. Again, adolescence is that time in life where they're still developing they're still developing their frontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, for consequences, for long-term thinking. So they're not going to get it perfect every time, but that's okay. They have to exercise that muscle in order to strengthen it. And if they've never had to make decisions, because at home someone makes their decisions, at school someone makes their decisions, and now they come for mentorship and you make their decisions, as soon as they're out on their own, they're not going to know how to make decisions. So you want to give them responsibilities, you want to give them roles, you want to include them in the conversation, and as much as possible, put them in the driver's seat. And you're there as a guide, as a support. And so just when you do that, it helps them feel like their voice matters. So it's not just, is this right or wrong? So that you'll hear that question a lot of times. Is this right? Is this wrong? Right? So a lot of times what you're calling for, is this the best way? Is this a better way? Right? So it's not right or wrong. Is this, could you do it in a better way? So when youth feel ownership and they feel agency, like they have control over their environment and what happens to them, they rise to meet whatever challenges we put in their place. They have a vested interest in their own development. This is naturally human. This is why I say this example a lot of times when I talk to people and people laugh, but I'm serious. This is why gangs are so successful in their recruitment because it gives them a sense of purpose, it gives young people a sense of ownership, and it gives them a sense of agency. So their recruitment is like it's 100%, like we need to learn. I'm just kidding. But like they are doing something, but we need to be calling them to something better. And if we're not, then that vacuum will be filled by other things that are calling them and giving them that sense of agency and ownership. And why does all of this matter to you as someone who's hoping to be a mentor? Is when young people are actively engaged in meaningful learning, in meaningful relationships, in close collaboration with adults like yourselves, they're likely to show better performance in school. They're going to have more positive self-concept, self-esteem. they're going to have better relationships with their peers. They're going to have greater sense of responsibility once they grow up. They're going to have higher rates of college graduation and positive outcomes that we were talking about. They're also more likely to have lower levels of any of the risk behaviors, as I said, alcohol use, drug use, lower level of delinquency, reduced levels of depression, anxiety, delayed sexual activity. So all the stuff that we don't want to see, it already lowers it. And all the stuff that we do want to see, it increases it. So this is not just wishful thinking. This is not just new age idea. This is research that is showing the effects of positive mentors and positive youth development on our young people. And for you, I feel like you're in a unique position as an alumni, as someone who's walked their walk before them. You're kind of the bridge between what was and what can be. So you walked those halls, however many years ago and however ways that they may have changed. You sat in those classrooms. You have now an opportunity to walk with the next generation, which is really, really cool. And so you know what it's like to be a junior or a senior and not really having a clear image of the future, navigating all the possibilities that are open to you at that time. Now you get to be that kind of mentor that you once hoped to have or maybe did have, right? So I really hope that you not are just considering it, but you're going to step into this role and you can do a little bit of intentional soul searching to say, why am I here? What do I hope to contribute? And then what are the best ways for me to do so? Because there are, with the best of intentions, there are certain relationships, mentorship relationships that succeed and certain relationships that fail. And the main difference that I've noticed is the idea of trying to control and run the relationship versus coming to the table as someone who's saying, hey, I have some things to contribute, but I also have certain things to learn from you. So it's that idea of youth adult partnership that you're coming together in order to benefit the youth, but you're coming at it from a place of humility to say that I may not know everything. Your experience may be different from what I went through 5, 10, 20 years ago. But I'm here to help you through that. So if you take anything away from today's conversation, is that, hopefully that you are approaching your conversations, your relationships with youth based on this idea that youth are not just problems to be solved. They are resources, they have potential, and probably more potential than some of us who are more set in our ways later in our lives. They have all this potential that you're there, you're walking alongside with them for a little while. You have the privilege to be part of their story, and then hopefully you can be a good chapter, a positive chapter, an enlightening chapter in their life. So when you part ways, that's someone that they're going to remember. You know what, Sister Maliha, she was the one who was my mentor, and I saw my own potential through her. Brother Talha, the way he spoke to me made me feel like, I matter, that my questions are not silly, that I have something to contribute to this world. So hopefully you'll become one of those things that your youth that you mentor are going to remember in a positive light. So in a quick summary, positive youth development is that mindset shift. You're not approaching youth as problems, but as resources, and that you're not looking to avoid the risk behaviors only. You're actually looking to point them to the positive outcomes that we want to have. And it's really rooted in hope. It's rooted in connection and empowerment. And as alumni mentors, you are in a unique position to build bridges of trust. That's they love their parents, but their parents can only do so much. They love their teachers, they love their siblings. Mentors, because of all the different hats you wear, you're in a unique position to do this. And youth really need real relationships. Youth can spot a fake from a mile away. So be yourself. Bring what you can, whatever, maybe some soul searching on what your strengths are and where you need to build up some strengths, and then bringing those to the table. And again, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be present. So I really hope and I invite you to build a future where every student that you touch doesn't just graduate, but they thrive. This is one of my favorite words. They rise, right? Because with them rises our entire community. Um, so yeah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for giving me this platform. I would love to take any questions or feedback or just thoughts of anything that maybe have come to your mind as you were listening to this very brief, very big picture of PYD.
Thank you so much, Sister Ivana. MashaAllah. Yeah, so folks, if you're on the call, you have an opportunity to ask a question. Yeah, so I'll stop there and see if anybody does. Need some additional clarity or ask a question, please, now's the time. You can unmute yourself or you can post it in the QA or the chat. For me, Sister Ivana, alumni are in a unique position to build bridges of trust. I had to write that down. It was just too powerful, especially for the students in the high school. If some of us are, intentionally wanting to be a mentor, but just not even sure where to start, like what advice or tips do you have for us, like as we've never mentored before, or what any advice or guidance for some of us?
Yeah, I would say get to spend some time with youth. If that's not usually where you are, if that's not the space you're in, and this is not just us, every generation almost always fears the younger generation because they're different and their music is different, or I don't understand them. I actually had a training for I want to believe that they were all high school teachers. And some of the questions I was getting is, well, we don't know da 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 da, and we can't understand. And I'm like, but you're the people who are is educating these kids. What do you mean you don't know? So when you don't know, exposure. The solution isn't to just shut away and be fearful of something you don't know. Even if it is that you're working with youth, but you've never mentored, just spend time with youth. Hopefully, in a structured environment like this, because you're already creating a mentorship program, that will become easier because you have a way in. It gets tricky when you want to mentor youth and you're not part of a real program. And that's one of the actually research shows that that's one of the reasons why sometimes adults hesitate to mentor and to work with youth because there's a stigma in our society. Like, who's this older person just hanging around youth? Like, what does he want? What does she want? Right? What's the hidden agenda? So in those cases, I always recommend parents to invite other trusted adults to mentor their youth because when you kind of give that green light, that person may feel more comfortable. But when you're part of a program, all you just have to do is show up and just talk, have a conversation, they're a whole human being. I know they're not done fully growing in certain aspects of their brain, um, but they're a whole human being with thoughts and opinions and passions and dislikes, right? So get to know the person who's sitting right across from you. I would say that's kind of my main opening advice. Obviously, there are certain skills that you would need as a mentor. Active listening is kind of the top of my head because that's an art form as well. It's not just hearing what someone's saying, but you're actively listening. Um, Asking open-ended questions. If you haven't done that, that's a shift in how we ask questions, questions that don't just give you a yes or no. Um, but yeah, that's really where that's what I'm thinking right now.
One question that came in the chat is, what advice do you have in regards to mindset, for some of us? Any tips, any guidance?
And that's internal work.
Mm,
Um, and it's not helpful that our society has adopted, before, I would say 5, 10 years ago, almost all the attention was on preventing risk behaviors. If those of you who grew up in my generation, you remember DARE and programs like that, which I just recently found out it was like a pyramid scheme for police officers. Because if you, as a police officer, you could work for DARE, and then the more people you recruited, you got paid more. Anyway,
mm.
that's a side note. Um, but programs like that, they don't work long term. When people have been resurveyed 6 months out of these type of like, let's avoid this risk behavior type programs, most of the kids go back to the community, the culture, sorry, the culture that raises them.
Mm,
So we've had programs like that. And intentionally or unintentionally, will where if all you see is programs to prevent risk behavior, what's the conclusion? That this person is destined for those risk behaviors. So this is why we are trying to avoid them. So that's the message we're sending to other adults. That's the message we're also sending to our youth. This is what we expect of you. That's why we're building our programs. And that's why the mindset is so important, because it'll inform the not just our relationships, but the programs that we build for and the outcomes of the programs we build for our youth. So it is going to have to be internal work to find the positive stories, to find the research. Because once you open the door to PYD and you start reading the research and you start reading the stories, it all makes sense. But it almost feels like you have to have an initiation for some reason. It's just not readily available. The stories in the news are always highlighting the negative. The programs that were around, they were highlighting the risk behaviors. So it would have to be, I think for some of us, it would have to be, again, just working with the youth and seeing, like being inspired by their stories and seeing what they can accomplish when you are giving them those positive reinforcements and relationships and environments. Um, and I think for us being Muslim, I can freely say that actually it is very much within our deen to look at a person based on the potential they have rather than where you find them in their life. So maybe the youth you're working with is struggling with some of these things. I'm not saying this is not, let's paint everything rosy and kids never get into trouble. And that's not what I'm trying to say. But if the Prophet came to Mecca and just looked at what was rather than what the potential of that place was, he would have been like, just scrap this. This is all crap. You guys are, burying your daughters. Like, what? There's no redemption for a society like this. But no, he saw the roses, the potential for the roses to grow in that garden. He saw the potential of Omar, right? He saw the potential of all these people around. All he had to do is remove some weeds so that those roses can thrive. And that's the same thing that we have to do with youth, is not to come at it as this holier than thou, but really follow the prophetic example of what is the potential of this person and how can I provide the strengths, the supports around that person so they can reach that potential.
Oh, we have a question with a hand up, Sister Rasela. Please.
Right. So, alaikum, Sister Ivana. How are you?
Salam. Thank
I'm the head of high school at UAF, so I work very closely with the high schoolers, 9th through 12th graders. The one thing that I am trying to work, I mean, my leadership approach with my students is I try to be as mentorship like as possible. Of course, I still have the disciplinary aspect of things that I have to deal with, but I think the one thing I'm trying to break through, and maybe your advice is appreciated, is um, how do we groom and help these kids kind of get out of this mindset it's all about me, and then be able to break this cycle of, once I graduate I don't want to do anything else with the school, I'm done with the school. um pretty much giving back with gratitude. The school has given you so much in years that you've been there. And then once they graduate, they kind of just want to be done. So
Mm,
what do you advise in the sense of like, as students and they're in high school, anything in particular you think we should be focusing on maybe that would bring these kids back? So that way the alum and the service with gratitude type mindset is ongoing?
yeah. So I have two thoughts that are coming to my mind. The first thing is obviously creating a pipeline, having some kind of opportunities, because when it's so open-ended, you're saying come back and give back, that's very overwhelming. And a lot of people don't know where to start. But if you now have this mentorship program and you're saying, here are the 3 roles or the 4 roles you can be involved in, and then also it has to be developmentally appropriate. So if they're just college kids, how much time can they really give, or money or connection? So it has to be realistic places where they can actually contribute. And then it grows as they grow older as well. So providing some kind of a pipeline, real ways, in meaningful ways that they can get involved, I think, and some of it starting even while they're still in high school, building some of these programs. The cool thing about positive youth development is the idea of youth voice and choice. And we talked about their having ownership. So even when you're building a mentorship program, involving their voices, involving having them at the table. So not building something for them without them. So have them at the table, have them ask them the questions. What is it that they need as someone who may want a mentor? Why do you want why do you not want a mentor? Why do you not think you need one? So having, I guess at the lowest level is like you're consulting them, you're asking them questions, but then higher in terms of involvement would be they are co-creating with your adults this mentorship program. They have real roles and responsibilities given to them. The second kind of more of a side note for me is that a lot of us, when we finish something, we just want nothing to do with it. I think some of that is really normal. So giving some allowance for that breathing space that maybe they're not going to come back the first or second year, maybe towards end of college, maybe once they graduated college. So that's, just not getting really harsh with ourselves or really getting down on ourselves that they're not coming back right away. But I think, again, if you do create some realistic, achievable ways for them to get involved, even if it's once a year and they come for like alumni recognition, you're just recognizing, you're getting them together for a dinner. That's one way to bring them back. And then you can build upon, because a lot of times we start with an ask. And we're not really, and Tayyab, you're the expert of donors, right? You can't just go to a donor and say, give me money, right? You have to cultivate that relationship. So I think the same thing goes with alumni.
Thank you for sharing. That was another question in the chat. How would we measure the growth in students? But
Yeah. And do you mean as a program, as a mentorship program? So I'll answer as a mentorship program because I don't think as an individual, it'll be anecdotal, right? If you're just a mentor, be like, oh, that felt like a good meeting, or I've been with this person for 2, 3 years and it feels like they've grown. But as a program, you have to agree on what data points you're going to collect data on. So I would definitely focus on some internal growth because we talked about internal and external developmental assets. Use the developmental assets to create your surveys like pre-mentorship, post-mentorship. So internal growth, maybe it's a mindset, maybe it's identity that you want to think about, maybe it's confidence. I don't know what is important for you in your community to grow on because you can't grow everything. So what is your focus? Then I would definitely say, because this is a mentorship program, relationship, like a relational growth would be important, like communication, um, maybe empathy, maybe connection. And what specifically within those, it'll be a question again for you guys. And then maybe behavioral growth, I'm thinking. Like, are they engaged? Are they participating? Are they initiating conversations? Has that changed from the time we started to midpoint to the end of it? So, I mean, again, I think the method would be surveys, pre and post, part of what you as mentors can do to facilitate some of that would be maybe having some kind of a reflection prompt that you ask them all the time. Maybe you ask them to say, if you're meeting monthly or weekly, I don't know how you're meeting, but one thing I've learned about myself this month is, or one thing that I've benefited from my mentorship, so some of these reflections that you can potentially maybe collect or not. And then, yeah, just as I said, these assets, like keeping track of whatever assets or developmental strengths you want to build, that would be really probably the best way.
Well, thank you so much. We're at the top of the hour. Ivana, Jazakumullah khairan for your expert advice and opinion. I always learn something new and I took lots of notes. I mean, just totally blown away by some of the advice that you gave. Approach your conversations and relationships with youth based on the idea that youth are not just problems to be solved, but they're resources and have potential. That one always just gives me chills. Like, we always say, okay, what's the problem that's going on with my kid that I need to work on next? Even I've fallen into that. I'll be vulnerable in front of my teacher. I'll be vulnerable and say I've done that. And I try to remember the advice you've given me over the years as I've been in some of your workshops, and inshallah here at UAF. We might need to lean on you some more. We might need to come back and get some of your help because, mashallah, so many alumni have graduated from this amazing school, and the school's expanding. Ivana, they have over 900, 800, over 850 students, nearly 900 students, and it's about to go in the next few years to into the thousands, over 2,000 students, and so it's just going to take a village, and that village includes the alumni, and so we're really trying to empower, enable, and establish this alumni group to be a resource to help the rising leaders that coming along to thrive, inshallah. So thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing your words of wisdom. And to everybody else on the call, thank you so much. We will post the video for the rest of the group, and we'll plan a follow-up session to get our mentorship program going, inshallah. So thank you so much. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you, Sister Ivana, to increase your capacity, to continue to teach us all this methodology and implement it, to give us tawfiq to be the most amazing ummah that raises a better ummah on this theory, inshallah, on this methodology. قولي قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa
Take
alaikum
care,
salam.
everybody.
Thank you.